Hello and welcome to The Fat Squirrel Speaks. Today is Friday, October 24th. I am Amy Beth, also known as The Fat Squirrel on Ravelry, the Fat SQRRL on Instagram. My pronouns are she, her, they, them. Thanks for coming over. The windows are open. My trees are still persistently green, which I'm not upset about because maybe they're going to give me like an extended foliage experience, which I'm 100% behind. I'm gonna go to a street fair festival. It's like one of those oddball one day sort of festivals that happens where it is everything from like hot tub salespeople to like food trucks to like people who make stuff. So yeah, we'll see. We went, oh my goodness, it's been at least, our kiddos were all little, like my friend group that their kids and my kiddo were like a year apart. So the kids were all little and it was so crowded, like just so intensely crowded. And my partner is quite tall and he has quite long legs and he gets really like wanged out when he can't like take a full stride. I think really he just gets really anxious in large groups of people, but we're just gonna go with whatever. Either way, he was all twitchy. And then I was trying to like keep an eye on my child because, you know, the kids were young enough that like theoretically they could just like disappear, you know, like they could just like pop into a place and then I, you know, would be frantic and trying to find them. And then also like there were just like 6 humans who have varying interests and varying speeds with which I move through these kinds of spaces. And so at that time in my life, I just had to monitor everybody and be really anxious the whole time. And so I did not enjoy it at all. And I had no interest in ever going back. But I'm going to try it again this year because it'll be just me and my partner. And we've had a discussion about like, there's going to be people. Let's expect there to be people. We are not speed walking through this joint. So we'll see. I'm hoping it'll go well. If nothing else, it's a good excuse to take a walk on a really pretty day, which sounds good to me. But yeah, did I say thanks for coming over? Maybe. Thank you also to everybody who commented either on the YouTube channel last time or over on the Discord discussion group, the Discord discussion channel group thing. There was lots of folks who had interesting thoughts about this concept of the introvert that's put forth in the book, The Gift of Not Belonging. So I really appreciated that. You know, it's just really nice to be able to sort of, I mean, of course, I wish we could do it in real time, right? Like I wish we could be talking and you could ask me questions and I could ask you questions and we could get multiple points of view, like all in real time. But alas and alack, either way, but not neither. Alas and alack. I am, however, very happy when some of you take the time to not only think about something that I've talked about, but also to just sort of like, you know, mull it enough to like give your own opinion or just like say how it sort of touched on something in you. I just wanted to say I appreciate that so much. And I'm very thankful for all y'all out there. For those of you who comment and also for those of you who don't, but are just thinking out there in the world. I love your whole faces. So I squeeze you. Consensually, of course. Okay, so let's get into it. Okay, so this week I have a sewing project that I did not do, but I thought I would share it with you. I have an update on my plastic canvas project, and I have a new cast on to talk about. So before then, if you'd like to grab a snack, there are none. Dang it, I'm really failing this week. There's tea. Oh, speaking of tea. Oh, I'm drinking Autumn Vibes Black. No, Autumn Vibe. I think Autumn Vibes is involved. And it's a blend by Plum Deluxe, which is very fancy. It's a sometimes treat. But you're welcome to it. It's down there. Go, or we're upstairs now, but just go get some. Just grab it. I have a question for you. So I want to like try some green teas. I want to sort of like, I'm trying to sort of decrease my coffee intake just for no good reason. I mean, not for no good reason, but there's not like a specific reason. It's just that it's getting more expensive, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just not enjoying it as much as I used to. Like I really used to just enjoy that cup of coffee in the morning and really like savor it. And now it just feels like it's just routine enough that I'm like, I don't know, I'm just not enjoying it as much as I used to. So I'm looking for other alternatives. And I've got several black teas that I like. Anyway, so I have several of those that I like. I have a chai that I really like. But what about green tea? I've tried a couple in the past and I've just been very underwhelmed. It may just be not something for me. I don't know. But do you have a favorite? But caveat, like for somebody who maybe doesn't like green tea yet or hasn't found one that she likes yet. Like, I don't need the most green tea-est of green teas, maybe. Or maybe I do. I don't know. Do you have one you like? I would love to hear about it. Okay, that was not on the index card. Let's get into it. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is a project that I did not actually do. But it was given to me at my crafting weekend and I wanted to share it here because I think it's a really clever little thing that's quite useful. And it's this pot holder. It's a hexagon pot holder. And there are several tutorials on YouTube if you just look under hexagon pot holder. I did specifically look at the one under the that's made by the Sewing Studio. I did not ask Sarah which one she used, but it seems like they're pretty similar. And it's a great way to use up. This one uses 8 fabrics. You need 2 fabrics that are going to be the back, and then you need 6 fabrics that'll be the front. And you don't need any special equipment. You can, if you have a hexagon template, like a plastic template, you can use that. But you could just trace one out on cardstock, or like cardboard that you're going to recycle, or whatever. And then just trace that out and cut everything out. So you don't need anything special tool-wise. And it's just a fun little way to use up, maybe you bought a layer cake and you're not exactly sure what to do with it, or you just have some like leftovers from other projects. You could make it whatever size hexagon you wanted. This one finishes at a little over 8 inches. So you probably need, between like the biggest distance be like 8.5 to 9 inches to get something that turns out this size, head for scale. But it's a really fun construction where you lay down your bottom, like you lay down your back fabric, you lay down a piece of batting, and you could use like the special microwave batting if you wanted to. You could use just some cotton batting, you could use an old sheet, whatever. And then you lay down your other full hexagon piece. And then the 6 remaining ones, you get to fold them in half and crease them, and you just like lay them on top of the base ones. The last 2 you sort of like tuck under so that you get all 6 fabrics showing. And then you just sew around the outside. But because you have this fun little pinwheely construction, instead of like having to bind the edges or fiddle faddle with them in any like big way, what happens is, oh, she did something special. She must have done French seams. Oh, she's so clever. The tutorial I looked at did not have you do French seams. But anyway, you basically don't have to like leave a gap to like turn everything inside out. You just, because these are all technically still, it's just like a little flippy flap. You get to flip it inside out. So if you'd like to use up some fabric scraps, or you have some gifts that you either like want to augment, like bring a little hot dish to somebody and be like, oh, and also, ta-da! Or whatever. I just thought it was a cute project. And as we're moving into like gift giving seasons, I just thought I would mention it. And so again, that's the hexagon pot holder. I specifically looked at a tutorial on YouTube from the Sewing Studio. Why do people need to do everything as soon as I record? I don't know. Okay, so I don't know what that is. I like to try to tell you what the ambient noises are because it is one of the things that drives me a little crazy when I'm watching like non-studio produced media. But I don't know what that is. So it is also turning in my brain. I'm imagining, let's just say, somebody is sanding something. Full stop. Stop thinking about it, brain. Full stop. Somebody's just sanding something. I don't think that's what it is. Stop, brain, stop. But anyway, I wanted to show you, I have made some good progress on my plastic canvas project. And let me just discuss. Y'all, I love doing plastic canvas projects. I know it's kooky and wacky, but I'm not gonna lie to you. I've even been like, maybe I do need to make a tissue box cover. My tissue box is looking kind of plain. I'm not lying to you. You get to use up scrap yarn. It's not the speediest of things, but you do get to make pretty good progress. Like you get to make visible progress. It's a short-term project. It uses different muscles than you're knitting. I'm just saying. You don't need any special equipment except the plastic canvas, which you can get at your local craft store or through the goblin who owns all of the world. You know, either way. So I am starting this project. I bought this on eBay. It's from a calendar that had projects that seemed like maybe they were all plastic canvas. I don't even know what year. I'm not going to try to find out. But this one is called The Handy House. It doesn't tell me who created the pattern. You don't need this. It's not particularly helpful. But I'm just showing you that I did not conceive of this all on my own is what I'm trying to say to you. And in fact, I also, so I don't know if you remember last time I was like, and there are no directions. There are like very minimal directions, but guess who missed like a really important part of those minimal directions? This gal. So you're actually supposed to use double layer of plastic canvas. Like you're supposed to stitch through both layers, and that of course makes the project more rigid. And I did not do that. I've never seen that done, or I mean, in all of my experience of making 3 other plastic canvas projects in my 46 years, so I didn't even think about that being something you would do. So I didn't. But I can remedy it. It's no problem. But anyway, so if you recall last time, if you were with me, I decided I didn't want to do this exact layout for the windows and doors because it just felt like a little bit too, it looked more formal than I wanted it to. So I sort of just went on Procreate, used you can put like the drawing guide on where you get like a grid. And then I just counted out I used the same proportions that they used. So just counted that out and then like did a little mock-up of what I thought I would like for the windows and doors. I did print it out because I didn't want to have to keep looking at my computer. And so that's sort of what I was thinking about. And here we are so far. So far I have mostly finished the front and back. There was actually a point where I was like, wait, are the front and back supposed to be the same thing? And I decided to just do it the same because like the houses that they have at Connor Prairie, which is like sort of our living archaeology, is that what that's called? Experimental archaeology? Whatever. People are in period dress doing period things. That kind of place. A lot of those houses do actually have like a doorway on both sides, even though they're quite small. So I decided to go ahead and just say, let's just do it that way. So I have my front and back done mostly. Now I am going to take some embroidery floss weight or pearl cotton or something and put in a little bit of detail on the window and maybe a little bit of detail on the door. I haven't decided exactly what to do. The stitch that's used for the actual house itself is called, it's not called the goblin stitch, but it's like the goblin stitch. It's just silly. But if you're looking for things like that you can use for resources to think about different sort of stitch techniques and stitch textures, The Royal School of Needlework, has an online stitch dictionary of like 8 gabillion stitches. They are not all needlepoint, which is what you would be looking for in all likelihood. Like some of them are black work, some of them are open work or cut work. I don't. Some of them are something called Elizabethan, which I've not even researched yet. Embroidery specifically. There's a lot of gold things, I think. But when I started, I just sort of used the stitches that were suggested. And then as I've been looking at the roof, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to do a different stitch with the roof and things like that. So I've also now got my sides cut. So I'm the wrong side. And I have started on the sides. I'm just going to do 4 windows for that. And then the floor, the bottom, I don't know what I'm going to do for that stitch yet. And then I'm hoping to do a slightly more interesting stitch for the roof. And you just stitch these guys together and you make like a little fun thing. Now, as I said, the pattern has you stitch 2 pieces of plastic canvas. Now, even if I had known that's what I was supposed to do, I don't know that I would have done it because it's kind of, maybe I have done that before now that I'm thinking about it. Whatever. Maybe I lied. I'm sorry. It's not intentional. I don't know if I would have done it because it's like a little bit more bulky and whatever. And this is the other thing. I thought, because I was thinking like, what am I going to do for the interior of this thing? Like my stitching is not tidy looking. I don't know if it can be, but mine certainly is not. And so I was thinking like, oh, okay, do I like sew a lining? Do I use maybe like wool felt and just like glue it on here or like just whip stitch around the edges? You know, I sort of like doing this like, what do I do? And it occurs to me what I think I'm going to do is, let's say this is the finished piece. I think what I'm going to do is actually take a piece of wool felt and just make it a smidge smaller, just a smidge smaller, like maybe 1 square smaller around. And then I'm going to just stitch it on, like just maybe whip stitch around the edges and maybe make a couple of, tack it down a couple of places in here. And so that won't fray. I don't need to worry about making edges, but you could use fabric and just fold it under. But the reason I think the wool sounds good to me is that like if I cut it out and then I'm like, oh, that's a little bit too big, I can trim it down without having to fiddle so much. And then I think what I'm going to do is then hot glue, because that's always a fun thing to get to do. I think I'm going to hot glue these 2 things together. And then they are further joined together because of course, then you're stitching them to this, you're stitching the corners together. So they'll be attached to each other. The hot glue is mostly just to make sure that the middles stay attached. Is that all I need to say? You could totally do it with just matching thread too. Like if thread that matches the exterior, you could totally do with that too. But whatever. If there's a reason to use a hot glue gun, maybe I'm going to try that. Although I don't think I have a hot glue gun, strangely enough. Maybe I won't be doing that. Anyway, that's my thought. The other reason I think the wool felt will be a better option for me personally is that the roof, you see the handles like that? I think that'll be easier to navigate with a piece of wool felt that you don't have to worry about fraying or whatever, versus trying to use the fabric folded under. But anyway, I'm just enjoying it. It's quite, it's just nice to have a different thing to work on. If you do like cross stitch or stitching, it's a good alternative that you can do in low lighting. You can do it without thinking too much. You notice I messed up and I made these 2 windows a row shorter, so I had to like go out and take out or whatever. So that's why there's a little blip there. I've got to go back in and fill it in when I get these ready. Anyway, it's just fun. And you could make it like as pictorial as you wanted. Like, you know, I've made ornaments before where you like embroider flowers around, like there's like a flower garden. You can, you know, do like a little cat in the window. You could do just about anything you wanted. You could make it as basic or as complicated as you would like. I don't own stock in plasticcanvas.com. I don't think there is a plasticcanvas.com, but I'm just saying. I'm using, so this is the 7 count. There's also 10 count, and there's one even smaller than that. Is it 14? But I am using Aran weight yarn. Piece fleece is, I think, they say it's worsted weight, but it's like old school worsted weight, which means it's actually Aran weight nowadays. So I'm mostly using piece fleece. I might have a little bit of Bartlett for the roof, you know, but you can just use Scrippy Scraps, which is super fun. And also, of course, you don't have to make it a house. You could just make it a graphic design. Hello Bargello has lots of great kits and patterns that, you know, have more like the Bargello, the more abstract designs, the more graphic designs. And she has the cutest set of Christmas ornaments. They involve, like, you make like a little diorama almost. They're very charming. That's Hello Bargello. Okay, so then in knitting, I have cast on the Bracken vest, which is a new pattern. I think it's new actually, by Tin Can Knits. And it's just sort of a classic cabled button-up V-neck vest. And like many Tin Can Knits patterns, it is sized from newborn up to 6XL. So the finished circumference goes from 16.5 inches up to 61.5 inches. And so that, again, that's the finished measurement. I am knitting the 4XL, which is a 53.5 inch circumference and should require about 1,200 yards. These cables are my favorite kind of cabling to do on a sweater is one where, how do you say that? The like cabling, like the active cabling rows line up, right? It's much easier to keep track of than like one cabling pattern that cables every 7th row and then one that cables on the 3rd and 8th, 9th row, or you know what I mean? Like it's a nice cabling pattern. It's not that complicated looking, but it is for me, it's more pleasant to knit that way. I am using, it's worsted weight, did I say that? I am using Harrisville Designs, their Highland in the colorway called Walnut. Now, this Harrisville offers their yarn both in skeins or hanks and on the cone. So when yarn is sold on the cone, it's typically sold with weavers in mind. Lots of times you will have quite a bit of yardage. Now Harrisville just has, I think their cones are only 8 ounces. So like Bartlett yarns, I think their cones might be 2 pounds or at least 1 pound. So the Harrisville cones are not terribly big. But the reason I like to use coned yarn for knitting is that because it has spinning oil in it still. So usually when you go from a cone yarn to a yarn that is skeined, it's washed and you wash some of those spinning oils out. But if it's on the cone, usually it is unwashed and the fibers it's usually kind of like crunchier. It doesn't feel as nice per se, but it's gonna bloom quite a bit more than a skeined yarn will. And I like that because I am a loose knitter. And so it is just easier for me to knit something at a looser gauge that's then going to bloom up and sort of like fill in those gaps than it is to start at that gauge. It's not a requirement, obviously, but it's just something that I do appreciate. So here is my swatch. It would have been interesting to show you the swatch before and after, but oh well. Here is my swatch. The pattern suggests US 7s, and I almost always go down 2 sizes. So this was knit on US 5s, and it worked out to be pretty much exactly row gauge, stitch gauge, stitch gauge. I didn't even check the row gauge because who knows? I'm not messing with that. Sorry. But it is really important. It's especially important if you're using a yarn that's on a cone to do a gauge swatch. It's really, really important, because if you start like, sometimes when we're knitting like something top down or something, we think, oh, well, I'll just check the gauge, 7 or 8 rows in, or I'll just see if I like the way the fabric looks or whatever. But with yarns that are presented on a cone, there's going to be a lot more bloom to the yarn, and it definitely affects the gauge quite a bit, and it affects just the look of the garment, of the look of the fabric quite a bit. So it gets, so this is my ribbing so far, and it just gets like fuzzier and nicer. I just enjoy it so much. So I've just cast on, just working on the ribbing. And I love Harrisville yarns. I've always enjoyed them. Some of my other favorite yarns that are presented on cones, I think I said Bartlett yarns, and then also Jameson and Smith offers their yarn on cones. And I'm sure there's like a million others, but those are just sort of the ones that A, I know I've used, and that B, come to mind. Let's see what else. I think that's all I need to say. Sometimes when I am working from a larger cone, I will wind it into a ball, because this can kind of get bulky to deal with, or whatever. I will sometimes wind it into a center pull ball, but for this Harrisville ones, I don't usually, because they're not huge hanks. They're not crazy. Another benefit to yarns on the hank is that usually there are fewer joins to deal with. And that also they tend to be a little bit less expensive, because again, the mill doesn't have to go through that extra step of washing and skeining. So they tend to be a little bit more economical as well. Of course, the downfall to that is that, especially on the companies that sell them in like 1 pound cones, is that, if you need 18 ounces of yarn, then you need to commit to 32 ounces of yarn. So that's another, that can be a downside. And of course, like if you're doing like color work and things like that, it's not convenient. The way this pattern is scaled is that for most of the adult sizes, if not all, I can't remember, this panel remains the same, this honeycomb panel in the front, and then this side panel, they remain the same. The way that they increase the circumference of the pattern of the garment is by expanding this side moss stitch section. So I may decide, or I'm definitely strongly contemplating, bumping this honeycomb section out another repeat, just to sort of get a similar scale for the front of the project. So lots of times when you see cabled garments, they don't come in as many sizes, because it is much more of a challenge to offer more sizes in a cabled garment, because it just is. And lots of times they have to jump in like bigger chunks, instead of a stockinette sweater that might, have a size every 2 inches, they might have to have a size every 4 or 6 inches, especially when you get into patterns that have really big cabled motifs. But that's just something to sort of like keep an eye on if you are a knitter who is not the same size as the pattern model. Of course, it's wonderful if there are other people of a similar size to you that have posted projects either on Ravelry or Instagram or something like that. But if they haven't, it's important to notice that, because sometimes there will be an element, like I'm remembering specifically that there was a sweater, it's been a long time ago, that had this sort of like little pin tuck element at the top, which was very charming. But the pin tuck element was the same size, it's the same number of stitches for somebody who had like a 34-inch bust, and it was the same size for somebody who had a 64-inch bust. So while that little pin tuck looked very lovely on the sizes that were closer to that smallest size, it looked very different on somebody my size. It made it sort of look like this tiny little little bitsy ditsy detail that did not have the same impact, but B, also just was sort of confusing looking. It looked like an accident or an afterthought. It didn't look like an element of design. It just sort of looked like a, huh? So that's just something that's important to notice if you are, again, especially a fat person or a person with a larger circumference who is looking at knitting any pattern, but especially patterns that are not just stockinette. Just something to have sort of in your brain about how the designer has scaled up their pattern. Okay, so then in reading, I have a couple of things I'll talk to you about that I finished this week. The first one is called ZomRomCom by Olivia Dade, and it is a spicy paranormal romance. So that's not something you're interested in, feel free to skip ahead. And I'll just read you the synopsis that is presented on Storygraph. Teaming up with your neighbor during a zombie outbreak is a no-brainer. But if it turns out he's a vampire, the stakes couldn't be higher in this infectious new paranormal romance from the USA Today bestselling author of, spoiler alert, which I have not read, but I will now. When Edie Brandstrup attempts to save her sweet, seemingly harmless human neighbor from the first major zombie breach in 2 decades, she's stunned to be saved by him and his ridiculously large sword instead. As it turns out, he's actually a super old, super surly vampire. But for all her neighbor's newly revealed cynicism and lethality, Gaston Max Boucher is unexpectedly protective. He wants her to stay in his safety bunker until the breach is resolved. Edie can't risk more innocent people getting killed, though, and Max won't let her save them alone. As they unravel a sinister conspiracy to set zombies loose on the world again, the duo meet a host of lovable allies and discover they're not the only ones willing to fight for the future of humanity. Despite the awful timing, Edie finds herself falling for the vampire who's helping her save the world, but all their dangerous plans could end their future before it even begins. As she and Max battle side by side, Edie must decide whether having a love worth living for. Edie must decide whether having a love worth living for also means having a love you'd die for. And in a world that grows deadlier by the minute, whether that's a risk she's willing to take. I did check this one out from my library. I did listen to the audiobook version. I don't have a ton to say about this book except that I enjoyed it. I also have enjoyed another book by the author called Love at First Spite. It seems like overall on Storygraph, it got a review number of 3.73 out of 5 stars. So it sort of seems like it's pretty mixed from folks. I imagine that's in some part because of the paranormal romance factor. In terms of like, I have not read very many paranormal romances at all, but the ones I have read were sort of like more dramatic. Things like Discovery of Witches and things. Do we even call that a paranormal romance? Actually, now that I say that out loud. Whatever. They tend to be a little bit more serious, a little bit more dramatic. This one is a rom-com, as indicated by the title. It is goofy. The protagonist is cute. She's chubby. She wears coveralls. She's goofy. She eats weird processed foods from a can. It's actually a part of the thing. And even the vampire, again, it's sort of like this sunshine grump thing. But even the vampire has like kind of moments of silliness within him. And definitely some of the other paranormal characters are goofy and lovable. So that's like, if you're looking for like the traditional, what I think of as a traditional paranormal romance. It's kind of funny to say that. A traditional paranormal romance, but you know what I mean? Like, if you're looking for those vibes, I think it would be like, ugh, what is this goofy thing? But if you're a fan of rom-coms and you're not particularly into paranormal romances and you're just like willing to give it a go, it's not, whatever. I liked it, and I don't read a lot of paranormal romances. That's all I can say. But I just wanted to hedge up you that a lot of people don't like it. Just warning, I guess, maybe. Okay. Again, that's ZomRomCom by Olivia Dade. And actually, I was going to start to talk about Gabor Mate's book, Scattered Minds, which is about the origins and healings The Origins and Healing of Attention Deficit Disorder. But I realized when I started to talk about it that I really have not thised it yet. I loved the first book I read by him that was called The Myth of Normal. Definitely like life-changing feels like a very big thing, but something like that. A book that I think about quite a bit, even though I read it several years ago. Happened to read it at a very good time in my life. This one is just not doing it for me on that level. And so I think I've sort of, because of that, I think I've been in this mode of like, I don't know if I really like this, or like, I don't think I'm really taking it on board in the same way because it's not that other book. Have you ever had that happen with an author? But that's not to say that there haven't been things that I thought were particularly interesting. I mean, there were definitely been things that were new information to me, or like a different perspective on some information. So I just need to sort of like churn the ice cream a little bit more before we talk about it. So I just wanted to just pop in and say that because I think I did say that I was going to talk about 2 books. So, okay. So that's all for this week. I should have a shop update November 1st with some tabbed drawstring bags. And then I will have an update November 15th with winter and winter holiday bags. Of course, I'll talk to you next week on Halloween. Oh, I hope you enjoy your last week of spooky season. I hope the algorithm overlords grant you with many dogs in costumes. What is that Halloween parade they have in New York City with all the dogs in costumes? It's so amazing. Future editing self with vital information for your mental well-being. It is called the Tompkins Square Halloween Dog Parade, and it happened this year on October 19th. They do have an Instagram account. It is NY Dog Parade, and I highly recommend. Okay, bye. This year, I don't know anything, but I did get presented with a Frenchie in like a beautifully constructed Aubrey from Little Shop of Horrors, little like sort of like paper mache vibes costume. So cute. Gus knows I'm talking about another dog. He's looking at me like, yeah. Okay. So yes, I will talk to you next week. Bye.